Well, I spent all day yesterday. I don't have it with me. I brought it downstairs. I made a crocheted soap bag. Do you know what those are?
The fuck is a soap bag?
So it's kind of like a loofah, but you can put your piece of soap in it.
Okay, all right.
And so I made it for my mom because she really likes her soap bars, but she also wants like something that she can like leave in the shower to like use as a scrubby. And I'm like, here, try it out.
Interesting. Yeah, but then the bag just becomes soap scuddy and nasty and moldy. And
then you throw it in the wash.
No, yucky, no thank you. Ooh, yeah, no, that's not for me.
Welcome. You are entering a strange realm. A realm of what ifs. What if movies, television shows, and video games were better, worse, bizarrer, or downright different? What might they look like? Find out on today's episode of CineCasters.
Welcome back to CineCasters. This is the show where we watch movies and then pitch them back to one another to try and like change or restructure them into different or newer ideas because we want to talk about them. My name is Janglez the Strange, and today I'm joined by Alyssa.
Hello.
And today we are looking at well, let me give you some backstory. I needed to do a movie I shouldn't phrase it like that. I, every week, look at a new movie that's just come out, or TV show that's just come out for the long and the short of it, which comes out on our other channel, the CineMasters. And then so this week I watched a brand new movie that came out on Netflix called Riverdance, the animated adventure. And I was intrigued because I actually really like Riverdance. Have you seen Riverdance before?
Yep.
Like
I have.
Online or in concert? Or?
Yeah, I've actually, like, I don't know about in concert, but there's a market that I go to every summer up by the cottage, and occasionally there will be, like, people doing, like, different
traditional
dancing
Irish
there.
dancing, yeah.
Yeah, which is really cool.
Riverdance is, like, an actual touring group and, like, company that does Irish dancing. And their stuff online is, like, super, super cool, and I really like it. But so that's why I was sort of interested. I was like, I'm gonna check this out, like an animated. I have no idea what to expect, and so I watched it. And then after finishing the long and the short of it, which will have come out yesterday, if you're watching this right now, I was like, we really need to fix this movie. So I was like, let's do it immediately.
Yeah.
And so I messaged Alyssa and was like, stop whatever you're doing, whatever you were going to watch, and we're doing this.
Yeah.
And luckily she was receptive. So people already know my thoughts. If you've seen the long and the short of it for this week, you already know my thoughts on it. So let's hear Alyssa's thoughts. Riverdance, the animated adventure.
I had to watch it at 1.5 speed.
Really?
There was a lot of stuff just bogging it down.
Yes.
Like, okay, so we start off, we get this really nice intro. We're like, oh, seagulls, you can hang out with animals. I don't know.
Yeah.
Animals seem cool. And then, like, you meet the grandpa, and then suddenly, like, what? The grandpa died? Like, what?
I was okay
really
with that.
Sudden.
That made
it was
sense
really
to
too
me.
sudden for me.
Okay. Because I thought it was great setup. So we're meeting all these characters, and then we get set up with Keegan's grandfather dying. So, okay, we have some kind of internal conflict, which is going to set us on an adventure. Clearly, the lighthouse has something to do with the huntsman. Like, it's too important in the story not to be something about that. So now we've got, like, this personal story. A fairy tale is going to come to life. It's going to be really cool.
I felt like Grandpa didn't need to die.
I mean, in my pitch, I kept it because it made sense to me. Like, there's something.
I changed it because it didn't make sense to me.
But to me, that wasn't the part that didn't. Sure, it was abrupt, but that's not the part that made me frustrated.
So then we get through that, right?
Yeah.
And then whatever the fuck happened with the fish or the frogs, I mean.
Yeah.
And then the sheep.
Yeah.
What?
It's like we get into an argument with some sheep and they bounce. And then we have this whole thing where he's like, I'm going to eat these sweets. And then there's like this weird thing where they go, like, they do this magical, colorful thing with the sweets, and then these frogs steal it, and then they lose their tadpole. And I'm like, where is my plot?
Yeah, so I actually was like, okay, is magic real? Like, is this like a real thing that they are now saying, like, there is magic in the candy shop, which means magic is now established in this quote unquote regular world. Like
Yeah.
we already knew the animals were kind of interesting because they seem to have a mind, like, you know, personalities and stuff.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, with the magic and then I felt more invested in what was happening with the frog family than with the rest of the movie.
Oh, really? I fucking hated the frog family. I was watching through
I
it
was
and I was
like, they have like a full plot.
Yeah, they do have a full plot. But that to me felt like it should have been like a non-talking sort of animated short. Like a 5-minute little thing with the frogs try to find their little missing tadpole, and you're like, oh, this is cute and well animated, good music, no speaking.
Yeah.
And you're like, bam, that's an award-winning kind of short film that Disney would do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or
Same
like
with the sheep.
Same with the sheep, like Keegan and the sheep.
That could have been a good.
That could have been like a short little 5-minute thing about a shepherd boy and his sheep, and the sheep bounce because it's kind of fun and no talking, just that, and you're just like, that's cute, but instead it's just sort of like lodged in there.
It's so weird.
Same with the hurling game.
Yeah, that was just like
I
there was just a
understand-
lot of like weird branching away from the main storyline.
I understand that like it's supposed to be development for Keegan, so we can see that hurling is something he's really interested in. Mm-hmm. But it sort of just comes across as like, why is this in here? What does this do for us? Like, it doesn't do anything for the plot. Also, the fact that the deer talk weirds me the fuck out.
And they stand on two legs.
They stand on their back 2 legs, and they talk like how adults think millennials talk.
Yeah.
I hated it. As soon as they started talking, I was like, I hate this. I hate you.
Yeah.
I just hate this. Ah, it's so frustrating. Especially because I thought whenever there was just dancing on screen, I was like, this I'm cool with. The dancing, I
even
thought
though
was
it felt like
excellent.
there was a lot. Like, I understand that different cultures have a lot of like connections with their dances and stuff, but like I felt like the dancing that they were doing had no meaning.
Yeah, it doesn't have any meaning to the plot.
So it's kind of useless in the movie.
The only one that I think it really makes sense for is when Granddad passes away, because clearly he had a connection with this community of dancers.
Yeah.
And so they dance as like respect to him. And I actually think that's the best segment in the entire movie is just when they dance at the funeral. And you're just like, this is impactful. It's meaningful. It clearly is a connection to the man and the history of the man and the like the tradition that he was a part of, and you're like, this is meaningful. But other than that, like there is the scene where Moya dances along the river, like she's dancing in the river. I actually think that's gorgeous, but it doesn't do anything for the plot.
Pretty. Yeah,
it's beautifully animated, and the attention to detail and the way she dances, like her foot movements, beautiful. I loved it, but then later you find out she was just dancing along on fish. She was just standing on fish.
Part of the magic.
But it's not part of the magic because it undercuts the beauty of that scene. And that scene has no bearing on the plot.
Yeah.
I really tried to focus on like the music and dance in my pitch to try and be like, this is how to make this important. This is how to make this plot cohesive and not dumb.
I moved away from the dance and the weird vignettes away from the main plot.
Yeah.
I just like was like, it's just Keegan and what was her name?
Moya.
Yeah. Keegan and Moya, and like they're just gonna hang out. But
yeah, that's what mine is too. It just was really strange to me to have these weird vignettes. And also, like, how come sometimes some animals talk and others don't?
You mean like?
So the deer talk.
Yeah, but they're magic.
So? The frogs don't talk, the seagulls don't talk, the sheep don't talk. The sheep bounce, but they don't talk.
Yeah, it's the deer are different. They're magic, and they're like millennia old. Like,
but that's not. No, that's bad design. Like,
I know.
Also, especially because like I understand like when they cross the river or they get into the forest, like it's supposed to be they're in a magical land now, but the frogs are with them. So to me,
I think the frogs probably bounce back and forth between the worlds because clearly they knew the deer, but they also knew.
But do all animals talk when they cross? Like it was strange to me. Like if the animals are gonna talk, it comes across as jarring to me because it's not established early on. We get this sort of mundane world with like a fairy tale kind of story or legend, and then when we go into the world of magic, which usually there's some kind of threshold. when you cross into magic, there's not really a threshold per se in this movie to establish, hey, we're traveling from the world of the real, as it were, to the world of the magic.
There kind of was, and it was like following the river, but then how they got back was more of like a crossing the river.
Yeah, and so
kind of deal.
To me, it seemed like when Moya danced across the river, that was supposed to be like the crossing, but there's not like, usually you get some kind of like visual representation of a threshold when you cross into a fantasy world, right? I'll give you a classic example. Dark Souls. Right?
Yes.
When you go into a new place in Dark Souls, or where before you fight a boss, you have to breach the fog, right? I don't know what it's called, but that's what it looks like.
It's just the fog.
Yeah, you have to go through, and it's a clear threshold. In video game design, that kind of gating, that kind of crossing of a threshold is used a lot for boss fights. Mm-hmm. In Legend of Zelda, you get like, they unlock, you unlock a door with a key and it opens, and it's usually like a brief cutscene while it loads the next section, but it like opens up and it's like, and then Link walks into this dark room and the door closes behind him, right? In classic Mega Man, old school Mega Man, right? You have, or at least Mega Man X, I should say, classic Mega Man X. The level screens don't shift from screen to screen. It's one fluid thing like you find in Mario, except for when you get to the boss, where you get a screen transition. And you have to like go through a door. That's a threshold, right? So you can see this, and it matters differently in video games because that threshold, that crossing, is about gating off parts of the level to establish information to the player.
Yep.
Also loading times, but to establish information to the player that can be really, really helpful. Mega Man was probably powerful enough that it could have just had the boss there, but the transition offers some kind of legitimate parsing of the level.
Like, yes, you're going into the boss fight now.
Yeah,
like,
same with Dark Souls. I don't think Dark Souls actually needs to have that scene. Loading is not difficult for a game like Dark Souls.
I think there are very few times in the Soulsborne. I can't speak for Sekiro, but there's very few times in the Dark Souls games where you come up to a boss without any sort of fog first. Like, usually you can kind of tell, like, there's, like, a gateway.
Yeah.
And even if the fog is not there, like, like, oh, I'm coming up to something, because sometimes the fog shows up after. Like, I'm thinking specifically the Crystal Sages in Dark Souls 3. And sorry, I don't know if you know them.
No, keep going.
And, like, you can still tell, like, okay, there's no enemies in this little corridor, so clearly I'm coming up to something. Right?
Yeah. So there's at least a kind of like visual storytelling imparting that information that this is a threshold of some kind.
Yeah.
In movies, it's a bit different because the threshold we need to have this threshold as a kind of divider between what is the realistic world and what is the magical world. So when we did Stardust, we talked about the wall. The breach in the wall is this threshold, right? The Lion, the Witch, and the wardrobe is the threshold, right? You need to have some kind of indicator to your audience that we're going from a real world to a magical world, if that's what you're doing. Otherwise, it's very difficult to tell, right? You could even argue, even though Harry Potter is an inclusive fantasy, as in the world of magic is included in the real world, just hidden, like the way that Harry goes from the magical world from the Muggle world is usually in some kind of threshold, platform 9 3/4, on the Hogwarts Express. The wall behind the Leaky Cauldron, into Diagon Alley. The Leaky Cauldron itself is a kind of, transgressive threshold.
Yeah,
it's a bar that's just on the street in London, but you can pass through these two worlds, and it sits on this borderline.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that from this.
Yeah, there wasn't really, like, I kind of figured it just had something to do with the river, but there was no real, like, line or anything.
There's no like crossing over the river. I mean, the tree over the river, yes, kind of, but Moya just pushes Keegan off the log, and so they don't really cross it. They sort of go through it, but then they don't go through it to get back. It's not well defined.
Yeah. And is it like supposed to be certain times that they cross? Because she's like, you have to be there at noon. Oh, we're right on time when they were there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right? Like there was no real define your magic. Like, come on.
Yeah, especially a threshold, because that's a really important part of fantasy.
Yeah, if you can only cross at noon, then you better be checking your clock. Like,
yeah. And then that
but
should be significant.
None of that on the way back.
That should be significant on the way back too, right?
Yeah.
Because you can only cross at certain times, and it doesn't even have to be like oh, we need to be back by this time, or we'll be stuck here forever. It can just be like, oh, we have to wait for noon, and then when they come back, it's like, okay, now we can go. You know what I mean? Like, at least it's relevant.
Yeah.
At least it's established. I will say that on the likes, I do, once Moya stops being annoying, I did like their relationship.
Yeah.
When she starts, she's like very condescending at the beginning. Like, I know this magic and I'm not going to tell you anything about it. You just have to trust me. And it's hard to tell because they haven't spent much time together before that. Like, clearly they know each other somehow.
Yeah.
But we don't know that they're like, she even said, she's like, this is my best friend Keegan. And we're like, is he though? Because all you've done is treat him kind of like garbage up until this point. And we the audience haven't had anything to establish otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't really sure what to expect with her. I was like just confused.
Yeah. Cuz like
pretty confused.
She's, I don't know. But once they like settle down, it's clear they actually like are friends. By the time they cross back over, I was like, yeah, I like their relationship. It works.
I almost feel like she was trying to like draw him out of his, like, because he was pretty like depressed about his granddad's
I think that's clear. That is clear. It's just sometimes she's like very condescending in a like she's supposed to be like sort of this, I know something and I'm not going to tell you kind of way, like follow me, and it just comes across as irritating instead of like you're not being a friend, you're just being a bitch.
Yeah. Yep.
Like and look, I was as if I was Moya's friend and she did that, I'd be like, wait, you've been holding out on me? You've known about this magic place for like how long, and you just decided to tell me about it now?
Didn't tell me. And you would think like as the grandson of the lighthouse keeper who will eventually have to, you know, protect those deer, wouldn't it be like nice to introduce them, to like let him know who he's protecting?
Yeah.
Like,
I also thought that the whole way the fairy tale is introduced, the legend of the huntsman and the deer, I thought that was kind of weird because the granddad is super adamant about Keegan keeping the tradition, and this is why. Ward the huntsman off, right?
yep.
But then Keegan's like, oh, it's just a silly superstition. And I'm like, yeah, but the fact that your primary caregiver, one of your two primary caregivers, told you it wasn't a superstition probably means you would do it.
Yeah.
I'll just spoil this now, but in my pitch, I basically was like, Granddad does it because it's a lighthouse, but he doesn't necessarily believe in the superstition either. It's just part of the legend of the lighthouse, you know? So, and to me that made much more sense, because why would Keegan blatantly disregard something that his granddad spent so much time imparting onto him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's strange.
Even if he was depressed, like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Like, and so I would think just personally that if I had something like that with, say, like my grandmother when she passed away, I would have like 100%, I would have been bawling my eyes out the whole time, but I would try to continue on whatever she wanted me to continue on, right? Because that was like basically his last wish in the movie. Like, he was literally like, you gotta keep the lighthouse burning, and then like 10 minutes later he was dead.
Yeah, he keels over and Keegan's like, I hate the lighthouse, I'm never gonna light it, stupid lighthouse. You're like, first of all, Keegan even points out that the lighthouse stops ships from hitting the shore. So if he's not going to light it, he's literally going to cause shipwrecks.
Like, yeah. I mean, he basically does, but, you know, a metaphorical shipwreck.
Yeah, no kidding. It just like you even admitted to yourself that we light the lighthouse as a way to stop ships from hitting the shore. So the fact that you're not going to light it doesn't make sense.
Come on over, ships. There's a lot of cliffs for you.
Yeah, exactly.
To ram into. Like,
it doesn't make sense. It's a bad sort of call to adventure in that way. Mm-hmm. Actually, in general, the call to adventure is difficult.
It's pretty weak.
Is weak in this movie because it's Moya who's sort of like, let's do this, and sort of drags him along without him knowing.
Yeah.
I did think that the once we got there, the climax was pretty good. Like once the deer and once the huntsman is there and the deer are there, it feels pretty good. Like I'm like, okay, the stakes are set out, and when Keegan fights off the huntsman, it feels pretty good.
Yeah.
I just didn't like that the story basically like sidelined Moya.
It did.
It was just, and there's no reason for it. She's just like, this is Keegan and the huntsman. Just everybody else is superfluous.
Yep.
Yeah. But whatever. The stakes were there, and then I hated the huntsman's design.
He was just a circle.
He's just a circle fat man with a terrible mustache. I wanted him to look like Sinister.
He was not Sinister.
No, he's goofy looking.
Whatsoever. He was just like he looked like the sheep.
Yeah.
I was half expecting him to start bouncing.
He does look like the sheep. It's so true. Which is a shame because everybody else actually, like, their design sort of informs their intention. Like, they all have really long legs, but because they're doing Riverdance, it makes sense. Like, it's an exaggerated feature in order to show off the feet and legs. That makes sense to me. The huntsman...
It was kind of unnerving, but yeah, anyways.
Yeah, it's scarecrowy. It's a little strange, but the huntsman is just this, like, he's just a circle, this round circle, and it's sort of just like, I don't get it. Like,
did they design him that way to be, like, specifically, like, as far of an opposite from the main characters as possible? Because everyone's really, like, pretty lanky.
Yeah.
Like, even the muscular buff dudes are, like...
pretty tall.
Still, like, tall and long-legged, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe there's supposed to be some juxtaposition there, but I think they easily could have made him, like, instead of being round, make him, like, much more sinister.
Yeah. So, while we were talking, you might have had something else, but let me know. While we were talking, I've just kind of had, like, a half pitch kind of forming in my brain.
Hit me with it.
So I think that this movie could have been one of those, like, kind of whimsical horror movies. Like, so hear me out, right? So we've got, like, the forest, the magic forest, and you got talking deer, right? And what if the deer don't actually, like, talk with their mouths? They, like, communicate with, like, brain waves or whatever. Right? And, like, how freaking terrifying would that be to just have, like, this huge hulking, like, deer in the middle of the night to be like, do not be afraid.
Yeah.
And then you have this huntsman who hunts these terrifying deer.
And make him
and you're
terrifying.
like, you half want to, like, root for the huntsman, but at the same time, like, he's trying to spread darkness. And, like, it would be really cool to have, like, these two kids try to navigate, like, who's friendly, who's not in this weird, whimsical,
sort of like
magic
Hansel
world
and
where
Gretel
it's
kind
dark.
of like sinister fairy tale.
Yeah.
Just these two kids are in a dark forest trying to figure this shit out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spooky.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's my little half pitch. I think you had something else to say?
Yeah, I was going to say...
Sorry, I completely cut you off.
Now, I'm not saying this is the way you have to go, but in traditional children's design, the villain is often... this is very Disney-ified, but the villain is often... designed in a way that is much more angular, sharp corners and angles, and it's just, Jafar. It's just a classic, like, way to show, or Maleficent is a classic way to show, like, pointiness is bad, whereas smooth
Pointiness
features
is evil.
Yeah, where smooth features and gentle curves tend to be good, right?
Yeah.
At least in women, that's often how they're depicted. So it's just very strange to me to be like, let's just draw the huntsman as a circle and be like, he's the bad guy, when he's just doofy looking.
Yeah. I don't know what they were trying to do with that. The character design was a little scary.
It's just as soon as he, like, floated in on the raft, like after the lighthouse didn't after Keegan didn't set the lighthouse up, he like floats in on the raft and you can see him paddling and he's just this big circle and all I could hear in my head was like doom doo 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 doom doo 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 doom. Like there's no, I just need like the tuba, like like just no.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh my god.
Doofy. He's not sinister, especially because like when he shows up in the dark, when Keegan goes into like the ancient lighthouse, he's like, this is a lighthouse of old, and he's like wandering around in the dark, and the huntsman shows up. That should have been spooky. It should have been scary.
It just was like.
But he just has this weird beard and is round, and he's just like, thanks for helping me out, Keegan. Also, it's Brendan Gleeson, and Brendan Gleeson could have been really spooky.
Yes. I think that I almost feel like they were trying to make him imposing with his like circularness, but it didn't work.
No. I also didn't like that Patrick, the main deer, was voiced by the same person who does Granddad. It's Pierce Brosnan.
Was he?
Yeah, it's the same voice actor. It's Pierce Brosnan.
Oh.
And it's irritating because it's like, why are they voiced by the same person? Like, it makes me think that there's some sort of reincarnation happening.
The budget didn't work out. The
only other explanation I have for that, and this is probably a good one, but it doesn't come across very well, so this could just be me reaching, but it's a good explanation, is that the magic world is like a sort of a representation of Moya and Keegan's dreams / fantasies. Mm-hmm. So none of what happens there actually happens, because they say they've only been gone a few hours, even though what we've seen is clearly like a day or two.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that perhaps what this is that Patrick the deer is a fantastical representation of Granddad. And so his being shot by the huntsman is a metaphor for Keegan losing his granddad in such a jarring and upsetting way.
Maybe, yeah.
And so when they come back across the river, it's not... as though they've exited a magical world. It's that everything that happened in the fantasy world is a kind of... It could have happened. It could still be fantasy. But it could also be just a dream, like a representation of the things that go on in Keegan and Moya's adventure. Very Bridge to Terabithia, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, where like none of that is real. It's all just their fantasy, but it's representative of things that are happening in their life. So Patrick being shot and being voiced by the same voice actor could in fact be Keegan imagining and dealing with the upsetting loss of his granddad and this is sort of helping him cope with that.
Yeah.
In a bizarre
Yeah, I
kind
could
of
see
way.
that.
That's probably the best reading I have, and that's not super clear in this movie.
Yeah.
That's the best reading I've got, because the only other way that I would want this movie to go would be the way that I did my pitch, or, as I said in the long and the short of it, would have been, I would have been very okay if this was like a 30-minute just animated dancing.
Just dancing.
Just dancing and music.
So
just different kinds of dances and music that would have gone through. Sorry, go on. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, dancing like that is like hard. So
yeah,
I don't have any experience doing any like particular like river dancing or like traditional Irish dancing, but I did tap dance for about 2 years.
Yeah, I did not know that.
3 years. Well, I did a lot of different dance classes when I was in like grade 7, 8, and 9.
This is new to me because you are not particularly graceful.
No, why do you think I only did a few years?
Oh, clearly. Go on.
And so I did tap dance for a little while. I had a lot of fun with it actually, but it was tiring. Like 10 minutes of just, and you wouldn't think it's that bad because it's like, oh, you're just moving your feet.
No, man,
it's
like
you gotta really work. So it was hard. It's hard work, and like even at the beginner level that I was at, like it was like hard work. So like the dancing that they were showing, I was like, they're making it look so easy because it's just animated, but like if there were actual people doing this dance, you'd be like seeing like sweat like all over them.
Oh, you can see it, but they're supposed to look a certain, like you're supposed to make it look effortless. Like it's all supposed to be lower body and your upper body is like perfect. That's why they all have like extreme posture when they dance. That's accurate. Like the movie does a great job of showing that. Yeah. But because the plot doesn't have anything to do with dancing really,
Like, I really wish that they tied it in a little bit better. Like, I get, like, oh, the deer doing the river dance, or the river dance is to celebrate the magic and the life. And I get that. Like, they establish that. But, like, they don't specifically, like, have any moments that, other than the funeral, they don't have any moments that lead into dance that make us want to watch a dance.
Yeah, exactly. So the way that I would have done that, get around that, would have been like, well, let's just have like this is a 30-minute sort of like back to back. Let's show different styles, because like we get the classic sort of like river tap dance with the funeral, and then we could have the deer do it, because I thought that was really, really cool, even though their legs are weird because they're backwardsy, because they're anatomically correct. And then we could have Moya's sort of solo because along the river, because that's beautifully animated and it looks so cool when she's on the water, and it's a different kind of Irish dance as well. And that, you know, just like there's 30 minutes of material right there.
Yeah.
Done. It'd be beautiful.
It really would be.
But instead we got this mess with sheep and frogs and deer that play hurling. It's weird.
I still can't get over the frogs. I actually was so invested in them by the end. I was like, yes, but why is the one that was missing? Why is he purple?
Yeah,
is that the right child?
It's just to show that. Anyway, I think we should get into pitches. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I would like to go first because, as I was telling you this morning, I think that it's a pitch.
Okay,
it's not
a great one.
It's not Tiny Mutant Ninja Turtles, but it's a pitch.
Tiny Mutant Ninja Turtles was good. I think I have a pretty decent pitch here. For mine, and might be one of my better ones, because I was really invested in this movie. Like, I wanted it to be good, and then it sort of went off the rails really quickly, and which really sucks, because I thought the setup was great. So I am invested in this movie. So why don't you hit me with your pitch?
Okay. Had to have a sip of coffee first.
Yeah, man.
Okay. So I like the intro of just him like walking through town and getting to know that, like, okay, he does DJing, he plays hurling, and he's kind of friends with everyone and everyone knows him. He's a very like open dude. And so yeah, we get that same intro. He goes to help his granddad with the light, and his granddad is kind of like struggling that day. He's got, he hurts himself while he's dancing, and then they're like, okay, well, let's go get the lighthouse started up, and then you can rest for the evening. And yeah, so Keegan gets the light set up, make sure that everything is ready so that they can go back downstairs and have a nice relaxing evening. And when he goes to check on Granddad, it turns out that Granddad has, he's knocked out. Like he's not dead, but he's knocked out. So we get a transition into the hospital.
Oh, so he's had like a fall or something.
Yeah, so he's like, I don't know if you'd be like injured or if he had like a heart attack or something, but he's now in the hospital and he's got to be there for a while. So Grandma's out in the hall being briefed on kind of the situation. Keegan is sitting with Granddad, who is sleeping, and Grandma just basically like composes herself and tells Keegan they'll have to head back home for the night. So Keegan settles in upstairs to make sure, because in my brain, you gotta kind of stay with an old lighthouse like that in order to, like, if the light goes out, you gotta relight it, right?
Yeah, I would think.
So something that old would need someone supervising it. So Keegan kind of settles in his granddad's place, and then we can get to like a cut like a week later where Granddad's still in the hospital, and Keegan and Grandma are both like very like tired. Like they're very weary. They've been taking over the lighthouse. Keegan's in school, so he's been like tired every day. And Grandma also has to, take care of Keegan because Keegan's still young and he's a kid and he's trying to be strong, but he doesn't really know how to take care of himself, and she's also trying to take care of Grandpa or Granddad and do everything that she would normally do. So they're both like very tired. So one day at school, Keegan's friend ends up saying like, hey, I've got something to show you, but we've got to go at night. Like, can you get away for the night? And Keegan's friend's name is
Moya.
Moya, thank you. I don't know why, like, it's just not sticking in my brain.
It's a unique name.
Yeah. Which is why you would think it would stick, but
That's
apparently
true.
not. So, yeah, they go together to ask Grandma, and Grandma's like, yeah, go for it. I can watch the lighthouse tonight. You deserve a break. And she also kind of knows something. Like, she knows what Moya is going to show Keegan. And so they're like, okay, well, let's go tonight. And then Keegan and Moya both help get the lighthouse in order so that they can go and not worry about, the lighthouse. I also forgot to mention that Granddad did give that whole spiel about the huntsman and everything.
Yeah.
So we already know that stuff.
Yeah.
So on their way to the forest, Keegan's Moya explains about the possibility of some of an herb. Sorry, I'm like struggling to get words out today.
It's all right.
The possibility of a herb that could
That's an herb and or herb depending on who you are, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who can or that which can struggling that can possibly rejuvenate Granddad and get him kind of healthy again. And he's like, okay, well, first of all, that'd be a miracle. Second of all, like, why do we have to go at night? And third of all, where are you taking me? Like, why are we going to the forest at night? That's dangerous. But he still follows along because he's like, he's kind of intrigued, but he's still like very like doubtful. So she gets him to cross the river. I was gonna just say the river is the threshold because that just makes sense to me.
That makes sense to me. It's called Riverdance. Make the river the threshold. I think that was the point.
Yeah.
It's just not very clear.
No, it's not. So they cross the river, and then they meet the magic deer. I kept them as the same because I didn't know what to do with them.
It's all good.
So the deer are all there. They're all like fun, just like hooligans. They're getting into shenanigans. They're dancing. They're playing sports, and they're like just roughhousing and just being general goofs.
But if they're deer, how can they be horsing around?
I didn't say they were horsing around.
No,
You said they were horsing
I know.
around.
That's the joke. Come on. Anyway, go on.
And yeah, so they end up like dragging Moya and Keegan into their shenanigans, and Keegan the whole time is like, this isn't what we're here for, whereas Moya is like, oh, just like relax for a little bit, have some fun. And then the king of the deer comes out and catches Keegan trying to sneak away to go see if he could find this herb himself, because it's the middle of the night. He promised his grandma he'd be back in the morning, and the king is basically like, hey, sleep it off, we've got time works different here, and like, so it's like outright stated, time works different. And they will go tomorrow, so like just rest for the evening. So we kind of like switch over to Grandma, who is watching the lighthouse, but she's actually asleep, and the light flickers out.
Ooh.
And then we see the huntsman floating in.
Yeah.
And then we switch back to the morning. So the deer are just being hooligans again, and the king is just like, all right, so Keegan, Moya, we're all gonna head off, just the three of us, to go get the herb. And as they leave, unknowingly, somebody is watching them.
Dun, dun,
Not
dun.
unknowingly, but like they're being watched.
They're being watched and they don't know it.
Yeah, that's what, thank you. Words are not working today. So the team, the three of them, have like a relatively easy time finding the herb that they're looking for, with only like minor hitches, as they need to like cross an angry part of the river or something, or they like approach. Maybe there's like a grumpy animal that's protecting it because it's like, this is my turf. Get out of here.
Yeah.
And so they like have to like figure out how to get to the herb without, I don't know, getting hurt or something. So they get the herb and they go, and then Keegan actually starts to relax, and Moya is just like, this is good. This is good. He's relaxed, like he's chill. Because he's been really tense for the past few days and like very tired. He's been falling asleep in school, and they like have a moment where he's just like, thanks for bringing me on this because I feel much better. And I didn't even realize that I was, you know, wound so tight. So yeah, they hurry back because the king doesn't want to be far from his herd for too long, and he's got a bad feeling. So they get back, and the whole herd is on edge. They say that they were attacked, and the huntsman took one of the weaker deer, who we've been introduced to as probably like Penny or whatever. And Keegan's like, he's here. Grandma was supposed to be watching the lighthouse. Maybe something happened to her. So now he's like panicking, and he's like, I gotta get back. And the king is like, okay, well, it's not safe for you to just leave on your own because he's a dangerous man. So stick with us, and we'll all head towards the river together. You know, we'll try to catch up to him. Maybe we can still save the deer that he took. So they head out, and the deer carry the kids as they all rush together towards the other. So like they have to like go back up the hill to get to the river because that's where the threshold is, that specific point. And it's also getting dark out. I forgot to mention this. You can only cross the threshold at night. That was supposed to be the thing that I kind of had going on. So they catch up to him, and it's revealed that the huntsman was setting up a trap because that's what he did in the original movie, and I had issues trying to figure something out this morning. So he somehow catches Keegan, and he takes his precious herb that he got for his grandfather, because it's an expensive herb that it's like a cure-all kind of thing. And he basically like offers a trade to the deer, promising that he'll like take Keegan away and turn him into another huntsman if the king deer doesn't give himself up. And so a bunch of the other deer offer themselves up, but they weren't enough. So the king pretends to do it, where he's like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. You guys, you know, leave so you don't have to see this. Keegan, once you're free, like, just run, go to your grandma. And then instead, the king kind of like fakes out the huntsman and fights him. Yeah. I thought it'd be cool to have a little fight scene. Also, it felt really unfair to the king to just die for this person you just met. Especially when he was like 400,000 years old or something stupid like that.
That's why I think it makes sense to read it as this kind of stand-in for Keegan's granddad, even though that's not clear either. And that's clearly just my reading.
Yeah. So Keegan and Moya and the king all kind of like fight off the huntsman, and they're trying to get the herb back, but then the huntsman gets like, he crosses the river and the deer can't cross the river because if he does, he's going to lose his magic. Yeah. And so Keegan and Moya are like, okay, we're going to give chase. You stay here. Like, we'll let you know how it goes next time we can come back. And they cross the river. They find out that there are magic animals in this world, in like the main world too. It's just that they kind of hide themselves a bit better. And so when they do cross over, because the other magic animals knew about the huntsman, they were waiting and they're kind of there, and they help out Keegan and Moya. And they get to the point where like he's at the ocean and he's kind of starting to drift away, and the fish come help again, and I really liked that scene. I thought that was really cool. And they get the herb back, and the sun rises, and the huntsman vanishes. Nice. So it's all good. So Keegan and Moya run to the lighthouse because they're obviously worried about Grandma because the light went out. And And it turns out that Grandma just really needed a long nap.
Long nap. Aw. Old people be old that way.
Yeah. And so Keegan is like, okay, well, I'm glad because the lighthouse was out by the time I came back. I was worried. And so the three of them all head out to the hospital to go visit Granddad. So once they're there, Keegan is telling Grandma what happened. And she's like nodding, like, yeah, okay, I know. Mm-hmm. Right? I've been there.
It's all good, yeah.
Yep. And Granddad is, he's just asleep because, I don't know, he's like comatose or something. And so he's like, this is the herb that we got. I think that it can work to kind of get Grandpa up again. And so they like slip a leaf in his mouth or something. Yeah. And then they wait and nothing happens. And then they wait more and nothing happens. And they're about to give up when Granddad just kind of goes, oh, so you finally got to meet them. Aww. Because he heard what they were saying when he was asleep. And so after that, it kind of just cuts to like a nice bright sunny or sunset. And Keegan and Moya are both helping kind of get the lighthouse set up. They're helping Granddad kind of set up for the night. They give him a buzzer and is just like, if you need anything, just buzz this. We'll come up like right away. Moya heads off to go home, and that's the end.
Nice.
So I wanted mine to be more of like a rite of passage, where like if you're gonna be protecting the lighthouse, you have to know what you're fighting and you have to know like who you're fighting for. And I really wanted it to be that there's like kind of this other thing where someone else will kind of guide you to meet them, where like in Granddad's case it was Grandma, and for Keegan it was Moya. So
mine's different. Mine has much more to do with about the passing of a person and like getting over mourning. So my movie starts out the same way, but we don't get any mention of the fairy tale. Like there's none of that at the very beginning. It's just we just go right into this landscape shot past the lighthouse into town, and immediately we're introduced to Keegan and Moya, who are cycling through town together on their way home from school. And Keegan wants to stop at the music store to check out some new records, and Moya says goodbye to Moya, who's attending dance class across the street from the music store. So in the music store, through context clues, we can see that Keegan plays the Irish tenor banjo. And is looking for records to play along with to get better. But he's very excited because in a few days' time, he'll be playing with a whole group of people for the Irish dancers, which includes Moya. So he's excited about all of that, like this whole festival that's going on. So he grabs some new records and he heads out and looks across the street to see Moya in class, who waves back at him. So we can establish their friendship, because I thought that wasn't done very well in the original movie. So Keegan comes back to the lighthouse, where pretty much the same interactions take place. We can see Granddad's getting old, and Keegan plays a little bit along with the new records he's got, and Granddad tries to dance, but it doesn't work very well and has to sit down because he's getting older. And Keegan's like, yo, if you're not feeling well, like I can do the lighthouse, like it's fine. And Keegan and Granddad is like, no, it's very important that the lighthouse gets done. Eventually, I've been passing on this knowledge so that you can do it, but it's very important that we do it, because it's not just for keeping ships safe, but it's for keeping the huntsman away so that he can't get to the great deer, cut their antlers off, because if he does this, the deer won't be able to use their magic to keep the rivers flowing, and all life will die. And Keegan's like, well, it's just a superstition, Granddad. And Granddad's kind of waffly about the truth as well, but he tells Keegan, he's like, I'm not going to be the one to find out, so I do it every night, and you will too when I pass on. So I don't want to be the one to find out that it wasn't true. But it's sort of like a laugh. It's just a legend.
Yeah.
So the two songs, the two of them then spend some time listening to records, but then when Keegan's not paying attention, Granddad passes away, kind of abruptly. And so the funeral thing happens. And the same way, we get the whole dance. That's really, really cool. And Moya tries to cheer Keegan up, but has no luck. And Keegan goes through the motions of this next day, like that whole day after the funeral. But that night, he's expected to turn the lighthouse on and the beacon, but everything he does reminds him of his grandfather, and he's like, I don't want to do this. Like, the whole thing's stupid. I'm not doing this. And he leaves without turning the lighthouse on because he's just so angry and upset. And he's like, didn't even get to say goodbye. So then we see like we sort of like, as a shot, we like sort of focus on the ocean and how the darkness remains over the ocean, and we get an ominous musical cue. Dun, dun, dun. So the next day, Grandma tries to get Keegan to cheer up and prompts him to play banjo, but he's not into it. Keegan walks through town, but the things that have brought him joy before, like playing hurling or speaking with Moya or playing banjo or going to the record store, none of them are interesting to him. So instead, Moya shows up and she's like, I want to talk. And he's like, I don't want to talk. And she insists and drags him off to the woods. So while they walk and walk and walk, they come to a river, and Moya tells Keegan that they'll have to wait. And then they build a fire and they're sitting around waiting and just talking, just the two of them. And he's like, well, what do you want to show me? And she's like, no, you got to wait and see. Otherwise you won't believe me. So as the sun begins to set, Moya puts the fire out and pulls Keegan's banjo out of her bag and says, you have to play me something. And he's like, I'm not gonna, it's not fun anymore. And she's like, no, play me something. And so he strums a couple of chords, and Moya begins to dance, and only the light of the sunset, she dances across the river. And Keegan's like, okay, yo, you just walked on water. And she's like, come on, walk with me. And while he's playing music, he walks across the river, and then the sun goes down. So you can only do it at sunset or sunup. That's the threshold.
I like that.
So they're on the other. So now it's like fully dark. There's no fire. The sun has set, and all the woods around them starts to grow with fairy lights and fireflies. So it's like warm and glowy. And Moya tells Keegan that when her grandmother passed away, her grandfather brought her across the river so she could say goodbye one last time. The night before her grandfather, crosses the ocean and can't come back. Her grandmother. So she's like, we're gonna do this with your grandfather so you can at least say goodbye. And so they start walking, and eventually they come across these giant deer, these great, like, white, huge deer with huge antlers, and they don't talk. They're just deer, but they're clearly magical. And Keegan realizes that these deer must be the ones from his grandfather's legend, but he also realizes that he didn't turn the lighthouse on, and what that might mean. Because if this is true, the deer are true, then the huntsman might be true. And so he realizes, like, what has happened. But he chooses to not go back and turn the lighthouse on because the promise of seeing his granddad is like more enticing to him. He wants this to happen, and it has to happen tonight. Otherwise he won't, because his grandfather will cross the ocean to the other side.
Yeah.
So one of the deer actually comes with them and shows them the way to the ocean so they can like ride on this huge deer, and I'm picturing something like straight out of Princess Mononoke, like just this huge like forest spirit kind of thing. Anyway, so they get to this old stone building right on the shore of the ocean, and there Moya is like, we'll wait here until your granddad passes, before going to the ocean, and then we'll talk to him there. But before they can spot him, they see something crossing the ocean the wrong way, and it starts to appear. And Keegan hasn't told Moya about the huntsman. And he didn't turn the lighthouse on. So an old raft comes, and on it is a sinister-looking man who's like tall and gangly with long hair and creepy, and Keegan realizes this is the huntsman, and he tells Moya, who realizes like they didn't turn the lighthouse beacon on for like 2 days in a row now because they were gone that night, and the night before Keegan didn't do it. And so he's like, this could mean that the whole world's in trouble. And so the two of them try to fight off the huntsman and save the deer. And they like shoo the deer away, but they both get captured, and the deer returns, and we can get this awesome thing where like the deer saves them. Because it's like this huge magic deer, but it gets shot and has its antlers removed.
Oh no.
And the huntsman gets back on his raft and is leaving, and the two children are like heartbroken. And Keegan more so because he's the one who did it. He let his grandfather down again after having lost his grandfather. And as the huntsman is getting away, Moya jumps in, swims after him, and gets to the raft. But when she's on the raft, the huntsman is like much larger than her. But from the shore, Keegan uses his hurling skills and starts hitting rocks at the huntsman, allowing Moya, she can't fight the huntsman, but she gets the antlers free and hurls them into the ocean. where the huntsman can't get them, and they disappear, and the rivers start running again. But the huntsman doesn't give up because he's angry. So if he can't have the antlers, he's at least going to take Moya. So he grabs Moya and starts paddling across the ocean. And and Keegan can see the two of them disappearing, but he knows that light will stop the huntsman and will save Moya. And so he lights a fire and realizes the old stone building is actually a traditional lighthouse. And so he lights a fire, and this light reflected off the old glass, makes the huntsman disappear, and Moya drops into the water. But she's too far out into the ocean, and she can't keep up with like the waves and currents, and she keeps going under. And Keegan tries to swim out to her, but he can't make it, and her head keeps going under. And he swims back to shore and watches helplessly as she's struggling to keep her head above the water when the waves are like just too rough. Until he finds his banjo, and he starts to play. And she hears the banjo and stops thrashing about and starts dancing. And as she dances, she rises up out of the water and dances in the moonlight back to shore to Keegan.
Dancing in the moonlight.
Yeah. So she dances back to shore. And I'm just picturing this like beautiful thing as she like dances over the waves in the moonlight. And it would just be like gorgeously animated.
You're like giving me goosebumps.
So when she gets to the shore, the two of them hug, but they're like exhausted, so they fall asleep by the fire. And in the morning,
Cute.
like the sun is starting to come up. Just before the sun comes up, they realize they've lost the opportunity to talk to Keegan's grandfather. But they do see an old man waiting on the edge of the ocean, and they run over. Keegan thinks it's his granddad, but it's not. It's just the ferryman who helps people cross the ocean when they've passed on. And he says, are you really sure? Like the ferryman says to Keegan, are you really sure you wanted to say goodbye anyway? Because goodbye is sort of final. Because that would mean, never seeing your granddad again. And Keegan sort of realizes, and the ferryman tells him, like, you don't want to say goodbye. You want to do the things that make you think of that person. And you can say goodbye in that kind of way. The things that remind you of your granddad are the way to keep him close. And that's a way to say goodbye without having to say, without the finality. And as the sun comes up, Keegan and Moya return through the forest and walk across the river and say goodbye to the deer. And together they make it back to town, where Keegan plays with the whole band and Moya dances. And as night begins to fall, because it's now the next day, like they've gone in the morning, they crossed the river, spent the whole day celebrating, and now as the sun sets again, Moya walks Keegan to the lighthouse and then says goodnight so that Keegan can be alone with the memories. And he goes through all of the processes that his granddad showed him to turn the lighthouse on, while remembering everything that he did with his granddad and how the lighthouse is connected to his granddad. And he turns the lighthouse on, and that's the end.
Aww.
Yeah. I know. I was really attached to this, and as soon as I saw these characters and the animation style, and I really wanted to make dancing part of the plot.
Yeah.
So
I really like that there's magic in the dance, and it's not just like the deer keep the place alive by dancing. It's like the magic is the dancing. Yeah, the magic is the dancing. Anyone can do it.
Yeah, and so when Keegan plays, like it's in the music and the dance, right? So when Keegan plays, Moya is capable of doing fantastical things. And so is Keegan. But it's the dance and the music that allow her to dance across the ocean.
So he chose Bard as his class.
Yeah, he chose Bard and she chose Dancer, which is Bard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, because it's about it's Riverdance, right? It's about the dance. It's about the river. It's about the celebration of those things. And so to me, I was like, you have to have dance as a part of the thing. But I just thought the deer dancing was a bit bizarre. So
it was so jarring.
Yeah. So in this, we get at least 3 dances that are all important to the plot. The funeral, Moya dancing across the river in the sunset as a kind of threshold, and then Moya dancing across the ocean to Keegan's playing, because he realizes that, and we can see it with his technical skill. Before, when he plays in the sunset, we can get this sort of chill tune as he just strums because he's not into it. But when he plays when she's crossing the ocean, he's playing as hard as he can because it knows it'll save her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
that's I wish the my playing was magical, you know?
When we play together, it gets pretty magical when all 5 of us play. So
Yeah, I guess.
I
It's
like
not
it.
the same as making people dance across rivers, though.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone make someone else dance across a river. But that being said, Riverdance is pretty cool to watch. So yeah.
Yeah.
Any last minute thoughts about Riverdance, the animated adventure?
No.
I liked our pitches better, both of us.
Yeah.
Which sucks
that
because I
we
really
had
wanted to
some good
like this
ideas.
movie. I really wanted to like this movie because it's animated
that-
by not Disney.
Yeah. And I thought that it had some good ideas. It was just not
Yeah.
good.
Just didn't pan out the way that I wanted to. Great setup, some great ideas, beautiful animation, wonderful music and choreography. Just some
I
bad
like
writing.
the frogs, though. I did like the frogs.
I liked the frogs if they were their own thing, not in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were kind of. I mean, everything was pretty jarring, like from portion to portion in
Yeah.
the movie.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
You can find me at twitch.tv/AlyssaLou with 3 O's, or you can find some of my handmade stuff at Alyssa Rose Handmade on Instagram.
If you enjoyed any of our conversation about Dark Souls, Alyssa often plays Dark Souls on
I do.
Twitch. So if that made any sense to you, then check that out. Because I realized that wasn't particularly relevant to Riverdance, other than when we were talking about thresholds. You can find our band Robot Philosopher anywhere you listen to awesome music. You can also check out the CineMasters channel, where you can find the complimentary video to this one, which is a short review instead of just a full discussion. And you can stick around here for more episodes of the CineCasters and CineCasters Classic. Thanks for chilling with us.
Bye.